Today's special episode will be special for many reasons. Our guest is one of the most prominent personalities among Tolkien scholars and researchers, and we are really excited to have her in our inn. Hello, my name is Maciej and I will be your host in the charming Green Dragon Inn. In our podcast, I prepare and tell you interesting stories from Professor Tolkien's texts as we analyze them together with my co-host.
Hello, I'm Kasia, and in addition to discussing the parts of books together, I support Maciek linguistically, especially if we are talking about and in English, as we did today. I also take care of the technical part of our podcast.
The other two members of the team are Nikodem, who is responsible for all audio editing, and Alexandra, who is managing our social media. The Green Dragon Inn is a friendly place for all travelers. Here you will be able to wander together with us through the immensely rich works of Professor John Ronald Reuel Tolkien.
Because we analyze his text a few paragraphs at a time in each episode, we delve into the history, interesting facts, and some humor. We also compare our native Polish translation of the professor's works with each other and with the original text.
In our conversations, we rely heavily on already existing material, which forms a very sizable Tolkien's collection. That is the base of books on which we focus when we're preparing each episode. However, everything is done in a very inn-like manner as a loose and casual conversation between us. And sometimes, like today, between us and our special guests.
And if you want to learn more about our podcast, we encourage you to check out the episode number 0 or the trailer. There we talk a bit about ourselves and above all about the very form, inspiration and the goals of our podcasting.
So take a seat in under the Green Dragon, prepare yourself a pint of good drink, and we begin our today's journey to Middle-earth. So today's is time for episode number 17. As usual, it is a special one. Every 10th is a special one. And today is really, really special one because it is the first episode ever in other than Polish language. So
yes, so we speak in English.
Yes. But really, this one is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. We have a really, really special guest and we have a special team to discuss. As you all know, for the last 2 months, we were going through the first 2 chapters of The Lord of the Rings. Both those chapters are crucial to understand Tolkien's world, his concept, his philosophy. And today, together with our guest, we would like to look deeper into the fate and free will theme, which we are mentioning a lot during last month.
Yes, and now we are building the suspense, so I will continue that a bit, because there are a lot of great minds and fantastic scholars in Tolkien's Scholar Society, and today we have the pleasure and the privilege to host one of the best known and most important of them.
Professor of the Department of English at College Park, University of Maryland. She was teaching medieval literature and Tolkien's and comparative mythology courses.
Yes, and for us, Tolkien fans on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, mostly known as an author of extremely important essays about Tolkien's work, collected in a couple of volumes like Sprinkled Light, A Green Suns and Furry, A Question of Time, and Interrupted Music.
She also edited and co-edited many Tolkien's essays and stories. Smith of Wootton Major, on fairy stories, Tolkien's Legendarium, and very important for scholars, magazine, Tolkien Studies.
She had written a couple of other books. Unfortunately, they are a bit less known in Poland, like Pigtail, The Inn, Corbisko, or Arthurian novel Avilion.
So, dear listeners, it is a great honor and privilege to introduce to you Professor Verlyn Flieger.
Hello, Verlyn. Thank you for joining us today. We're really happy to have you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and here we have the short anecdote because, Maciej, go ahead.
We are really surprised, positively surprised, once we saw your answer to our email a couple months ago. We are actually great fans of your work, of your knowledge and your point of view at Tolkien's Legendarium. And I thought, let's write to Professor Verlyn Flieger. And now you are our guest. And that is really amazing.
Yes, I was doubtful at the beginning. Maciej wanted to try.
Totally surprised.
Here we are, and it's really great.
We didn't even know if that email address that we found in the internet was the correct one, because because you don't work anymore at College Park. So I think it was your College Park address from the university.
Now, after the introduction, we would like to move to our long tradition we have here of asking our first-time guests 5 simple questions to find out someone's story and connections to Tolkien world. And I must say, we are very curious about your answers. We already know some stories, but we would like to go through them for our listeners as well. So, Maciej?
Yeah, the first question is usually mine. For how long have you been dealing with Tolkien's books? I know this story, I heard about it, but our listeners didn't. So please explain us how it begins.
How long have I been dealing with Tolkien's books? You mean that is sort of interacting, not just reading them, but working with them?
We assume it started with reading, but maybe it started, differently.
Since I started teaching, actually, Tolkien was the center of one of the first courses I ever offered, which was in fantasy, but that was just an excuse to have. And that, I think, was about 1974 or so. And I have been dealing with Tolkien in one way or another ever since.
And what about first contact with Tolkien's books? First reading of Tolkien?
I first read The Lord of the Rings in 1965, very shortly after it came out.
Mm-hmm.
I read the British edition because it wasn't even published in the United States at that time. And I had never heard of The Lord of the Rings. I'd never heard of Tolkien. I did something that you can't do anymore, which read an unknown book by an unknown author, which had no baggage, no commentary, no extraneous, I can't think of a word except baggage. So that no extraneous baggage. And it was just such a joy to read.
And how did you get a copy?
I was working at the time in downtown Washington, D.C. at the Folger Shakespeare Library. And one of my coworkers, who was British, had received a copy of this unknown book from her brother in England. And she read it and passed it around to all her co-workers in the catalog office. And then it came to the accessions office where I worked. And we all read it. And pretty soon, everybody had read it.
Yeah.
About at afternoon tea and at lunch, who do you like best? I like Strider. I like Aragorn. Thing. But it was just a good book. We didn't realize that it was to have the impact on the rest of the world that it had. Mm-hmm. And in respect, we were kind of free to just enjoy it.
Yeah, because nowadays, even if you read it for the first time, it's really hard to be free of all cultural references we have all around, like from pictures and movies and
now Tolkien is everywhere, so it is hard to have this completely fresh in this team. So we are really jealous that you have that privilege to read Tolkien without all the reviews and everything.
Yes. Which book is your favorite one? And a follow-up to that, do you have your favorite quote of Tolkien?
Which book about Tolkien or by Tolkien?
By Tolkien.
The Lord of the Rings.
Easy answer. Okay, and favorite quote from other book of Tolkien? My
favorite quote from the fiction is one that I cannot repeat without crying. So you'll have to forgive me if I do. it's when Frodo explains to Sam why he can no longer stay in Middle-earth. And as you see, I'm starting to cry just thinking about it. But it seems to me to go to the heart of the matter, which is about the fact that we all, sooner or later, lose what we love just in the course of time. And I think that may be the main point that I take away from The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, great. It's great.
Yeah, and the relation is really special. And I also see that in the conversation.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Which place or places in the whole Legendarium would you like to spend your retirement in?
Which place in the Legendarium?
Yes.
Yes, if you can move to Middle-earth.
Crick Hollow.
Oh, okay. But it's Shire still.
Well, because it's on the other side of the river, because it looks like a very pleasant place with a lot of good food and baths and good fellowship. And it's also right on the edge of the dangerous other world of the old forest. So for me, it has both warmth and comfort and safety and peril. And that puts an edge on the warmth and comfort and safety. So I think it would be Crick Hollow where I would like to live.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think we never had.
And it's really original because we heard about Shire to answer for these questions, but never about Crick Hollow.
Yeah, we even had one guest who said that they would like to do the canoeing trip on Anduin River.
Yeah.
Or like a lot of travels. Yeah, so, but yeah, that's really great. All right, the next question, and here maybe for our listeners, because Verlyn is joining us from, Professor is joining us from the room that we see a lot of books in, with the bookshelves. And the next question is exactly about that. How many books by Tolkien and about Tolkien do you have in your collection? Have you ever counted?
I've tried several times, but it keeps growing. I would say between 200 and 300.
Yeah, that's right.
Strictly on the subject of Tolkien or by Tolkien.
And is there still something that you would like to have, like a special edition of something, that you are already satisfied with the books you have?
I don't much like special editions because you can't write in them.
That's true.
So I like good hardcover books, but the kind that are accessible, that you can make notes in the margin and talk to yourself as you're reading.
Yeah, but that's true, because I gifted Maciej with the really nice edition of Silmarillion, and I think Maciej opened it once because
I didn't.
Because we are too afraid to destroy it.
I don't want to touch it. It's too beautiful. Okay, next question, the last from this first 5. If you could choose one person, only one person, to go with to Mount Doom and destroy, or at least try to destroy the ring, who will it be? From whole Legendarium, not only from Lord of the Rings, but whole Legendarium.
Gollum.
What did you say?
Why Gollum?
He's the only one who knows the way.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't make that journey without Gollum. Also, I think he's the most interesting character.
He is a very interesting character, yeah. Okay, that's also original.
Yes, that's original. We already had Fingolfin. We had We had Arwen and Luthien, but Gollum, I think it's the first time.
Yeah, he can also help if Frodo or someone who is carrying the ring will fail, like Frodo did, so he can bite the finger out.
Proved himself already.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So Professor, before we jump into our main topic, can you tell us about your plans regarding Tolkien's work? Maybe, I don't know, some plans or visit, books. Is there any place where our listeners can expect your involvement? Because we listened to your lecture during
Christopher
Tolkien conference recently.
In November.
So do you plan something like that this year?
Well, I have a new collection of essays coming out on Tolkien. And I suppose that would be my next appearance, contribution, whatever. It's
great.
called Real Taste for Fairy Stories, and it's going to be published by Walking Tree Press in Switzerland.
Okay. Yeah, that's the great news.
Yes, that's the great news.
We appreciate it, yeah.
And you know the date already? Or
No,
roughly?
sometime, I hope, later this year. I've already put the book together, and it is with the publisher, and they are doing all the final tweaking. So whenever they tell me, then it will be out.
Are there any plans for you to be in Europe and to sign books?
Oh, no, alas, no plans for me to go to Europe.
Okay. So we must go to USA. Okay. Thank you, Professor, for this short introduction. And now we will do our short break and we will start the main discussion right after it.
Yes, it's time for our self-advertising because at the beginning of this season, we have launched our profile on Patronite.
This means that every one of you can financially support our activities from now on. Consider if you are willing and able to join the group of our patrons. We offer you quite a lot in return, starting with a dedicated Discord channel, additional materials, or the opportunity to join us during the recordings as a listener, and also various gadgets and gifts.
So we invite you to join us on Patronite. Your support will help us not only to maintain the level of the podcast, but raise it even higher. You will find links to our Patronite on our website, and they will be also visible on YouTube and in other media.
But of course, you don't have to do anything, because the podcast will continue to appear in the same form as before, absolutely for free. After all, we are Tolkien fans, and we create out of pure passion.
We invite you also to our Instagram and Facebook, where we regularly upload posts extending current episodes. Meanwhile, on our website you will find links to all episodes along with footnotes and our library of books that we use to create the podcast.
We also encourage you to support us on all the channels where you follow us. Your likes, ratings or reviews make us more visible. This means more Tolkien fans joining our inn.
And as a result, we have more interesting discussions, so don't hesitate to ask questions or comment. Okay, and now we would like to move to the main topic for today's discussion, and this is actually why we reached out to Professor Flieger to join us in discussing the theme of fate and free will, because Maciej came up with the idea that we would like to dive deeper in this theme after going through first 2 chapters of Lord of the Rings. And we would like to discuss it because it's one of the most complex but very important themes of Tolkien's own philosophy, which he showed in his Legendarium. Yeah, fate and free will. And if one of your essays, Professor, we in Green Sands and Fairy, the music and the task, fate and free will in Middle Earth, we read that, and now I will quote, "The contradiction resides in the simultaneous presence in his invented world of 2 opposing principles, fate and free will, imagined as operating side by side, sometimes in conflict, sometimes interdependent." And before going to discussion, we have one more quote from Silmarillion now. Maciej.
Yeah, let's explain with Tolkien words what fate and free will actually is, how we understand it. It is written in Silmarillion, the Quenta Silmarillion actually, the first chapter of the beginning of days. Behold, I love the earth, which shall be a mansion for the Quendi and the Atani. But the Quendi shall be the fairest of all earthly creatures, and they shall have and shall conceive and bring forth more beauty than all my children, and they shall have the greater bliss in this world. But to the Atani I will give a new gift. Therefore, to will that the hearts of men should seek beyond the world, and should find no rest therein, but they should have a virtue to shape their life amid the powers and chances of the world, beyond the music of the Ainur, which is as fate to all things else, and of their operation everything should be in form and deed completed, and the world fulfilled unto the last and smallest.
Yes, and Professor, we would like to ask you to help us and our listeners to understand this theme. So what fate and free will actually is here we hear that fate is music of Ainur. So is it one-to-one? Should we understand it like that?
As I understand your question, yes, but I'm not sure I've got all the meat out of what you're trying to say. It seems to me fairly clear.
And how important it was in Tolkien's mind? I mean, the fate and free will. Did he base from the beginning on that, on creating the story? Or is it something that came up?
Oh, my goodness. Well, in a sense, I think everything came up.
Mm.
It was in the process of subcreation, of making a world. I think that he didn't sit down with a checklist of things that he needed. His creation is more organic than that. But the presenting concept, which is the music, is a beautiful notion, but also in some ways a restrictive one. The notion that the whole universe is a great symphony playing itself in a way is breathtaking. But then you get down to the practicalities and you think, okay, then is this a closed system? Any piece of music is only that piece of music, and you can't play Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and Christmas carols at the same time. You are limited by the kind of music that you are dealing with. And I think that Tolkien realized along the way, in a sense, that while the music was a beautiful concept, it was also very limiting. And that's why he created this sort of wild card, which is the ability of one particular race in the world, one aspect of that world, to go beyond the boundaries. Otherwise, he would have a closed system with no surprises. And I think that he wanted surprises.
Yeah.
But this especially developed after the hobbits came into the story. He doesn't do a great deal with fate and free will, a little bit in the Silmarillion, mainly with Fëanor. But when the hobbits came in, they interjected a kind of playfulness into the story that made it, I feel, easier for Tolkien to loosen things up a little bit and see what happened. And so he gave to men, and of course, hobbits are part of the race of men, the ability to go beyond the music, and that is to change things. it's kind of like if you move back to a system such as we have in this existing world, it's kind of like providence. You've got the world, you've got what's going to happen, but then you need a wild card. You need the unexpected, or your story just becomes rote. And so he gave free will to one race, men. But they don't always know when they are invoking it. So they can be acting within free will and not be entirely aware of it. Does that make sense?
Of course.
Yes, and now I think about, because in the last year we were analyzing Hobbit and we were using a lot the history of the Hobbit, and there we read through the different versions of the Hobbit. At the very beginning of the Hobbit, and Bilbo was solving a lot of situations by himself, and there was no luck and fate involved that much, right? It was in the later version of text.
Yeah, he changed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so it works. I mean, it matches really well with what you just explained to us. And what about the dwarves? How we should count them?
Because we know that children of Iluvatars are divided into two species at the beginning: elves and men's, and then came dwarves after it. And dwarves are actually wasn't planned in the music, or they were. How we can understand position of dwarves in fate and free will and this theme?
Well, you mustn't. Of course you can if you want to. I don't mean to be real, but I don't think it's useful to try to make this into some kind of system that you can represent or make a chart of. Tolkien, I don't think, was thinking along those lines. When he wrote The Hobbit, it was not really until about halfway through a part of the whole Legendarium, and then you see him trying to sort of retrofit it in. So the question, does Bilbo have free will? Do the dwarves have free will? Is not going to be a very useful question. Mm-hmm. Because Tolkien wasn't thinking in those kind of cosmic terms when he was writing it. And of course, he rewrote The Hobbit and he rewrote The Lord of the Rings innumerable times from beginning to end, and then backwards from end to beginning. But if you look at the manuscripts, and they are at Marquette University, and they've been digitized, and anyone who is really interested can go and have a look, you will see where he goes back and changes the diction of things to make it more specific. I'm thinking of two examples. One is a wonderful chapter in Book 2, Volume 2, called The Choices of Master Samwise. And the title is, of course, very deliberately applied by Tolkien. Sam has choices, and it's when he is deciding, he thinks Frodo is dead, killed by the spider.
Yeah.
And he is trying to figure out what he should do. And should is an English word, and we use it without really thinking very much about it. but it comes from Anglo-Saxon Skurlan and Old Norse Skurlan, and it means to have to. So it isn't just going to, it's what one is obliged to do. It's akin to fate, but I don't want to use that word. I just want to stick with the language, okay?
Yeah.
So Sam tries to decide what he should do. He thinks he's using the future tense, but he is actually using the old Anglo-Saxon. What is he supposed to do? And he's got the choices. Stay with Frodo. Kill Gollum. Kill himself. But that chapter is put there to show somebody who is not going to be privy to the outcome of his decisions, having to make decisions, because that's what Tolkien likes. Not necessarily fate and free will as oppositions, like two statues at either end of but what is the best thing for me to do now, whether I'm meant to or not? And Sam goes through agonies trying to figure out what the proper thing to do is. And finally, he takes the ring and goes, and then is followed by the orcs, and he thinks, oh my God, I made the wrong choice. I did it wrong. I knew I would, is what he says. And of course, he has made the absolutely right choice, which is to get it away from those who would steal it. So Tolkien uses the word choice as much as he uses the sort of big cosmic concepts. He brings it down to the individual in the moment of balance. Which way do you go? What's your choice? And the choice is not informed. You don't have enough information to go on, which is exactly the way of human life. There's a passage in one of the manuscripts at Marquette where, and this is in handwriting that is almost impossible to read because he's writing so fast, but it is at Mount Doom, and Frodo has arrived with Sam and Gollum at the cracks of Doom, and the moment is there to dispose of the ring. And at this point, the manuscript says, Frodo said, I cannot do this. And then above that is written, I do not choose to do this. And the difference is one of nuance. And it sort of muddies the water, because Frodo is saying, I choose to not make a choice. So what does that mean? Well, if you pull back and see the whole setup, it means he is choosing not to exercise his will. Well, that's very profound. I know many people who get to that scene at Mount Doom, and it's a corker of a scene, realize all the layers of meaning that Tolkien has built into it. For Frodo to say, I do not choose. And then he says, I will not do, will being volition. You see Frodo, under the influence of the ring, making what seems to be a free choice. And then pow, in comes Gollum and grabs his hand and struggles with it. Now, is Gollum acting from choice or from compulsion? Or is there any difference at this point?
Yeah.
You see how complex that one incandescent moment is. I'm sorry, I thought somebody had a question.
No.
We are just hearing because it is amazing. We are just listening, yes.
No, but yes, at this point, and also in Gollum's life, it was... it's difficult to even separate that, right?
It's impossible to separate.
Yeah. And
well, he doesn't want you to separate it.
Yes. That's
the whole idea. He wants it to be all mixed up. There are two very small sentences that I've written about earlier, so you may be familiar with them already. And they're lines by Gandalf about Gollum, and a line by Frodo about himself. When at the Council of Elrond they learn that Gollum has escaped, and all hell is going to break loose. And Gandalf says, well, he is gone. We can't do anything about that. He must do as he will. Well, that's a clear contradiction. Because what Gandalf is saying is he is destined to follow his own desires. Is that fate? Is that free will? And the answer is yes to both questions.
Yeah.
And the other is just the reverse of that statement. When Frodo is on Alan-Hen, and he's put on the ring, and the eye is looking for him, and he's cowering under the seat. It's after he has fled from Boromir. And he says, I see now. I will do what I must. It's no accident that that's the mirror image of what Gandalf says about Gollum. He must do what he will. Frodo will do what he must. But what's the difference?
Yeah, that's the question. For first view, it is contradiction, but it's not.
Well, it's a contradiction that Tolkien wants to leave there.
Yeah.
He didn't want you to solve it because you can't in real life. You can never decide when any particular thing, except our existence on Earth, was a matter of fate. I didn't choose to be here. That's not my decision.
Yeah.
But here I am. So that's my fate. But within that, then, I'm faced with more choices than I know how to read carefully. If somebody buys a gun and goes out on the street and shoots somebody, is that fate or free will?
Both.
It's fate for one, it's fate for the victim, but it's free will for the shooter.
For the shooter, yeah. Amazing.
We're with this conundrum.
And we already touched upon the One Ring story, and now we wanted to look back at The Hobbit and how it all began with Bilbo. And as a reminder, I will read a part of The Hobbit of the chapter 5. And these are Bilbo's first moves and actions after regaining consciousness. And Hobbit is crawling in the dark emptiness of Goblin's Cave. And this is what happens. His head was swimming, and he was far from certain even of the direction that they had been going in when he had his fall. He guessed as well as he could, and crawled along for a good way, till suddenly his hand met what felt like a tiny ring of cold metal lying on the floor of the tunnel. It was a turning point in his career, but he did not know it. He put the ring in his pocket almost without thinking. Certainly it did not seem of any particular use at the moment. So So here we were talking about it with Mati, and again, trying to separate the fate and free will here. I don't know if we should, but the fate was...
I don't know if you can.
Yeah, that's true. So the fate in finding the ring, but the free will of just taking it, putting it into his pocket. And then, because this chapter continues, and then we have another crucial moment, almost at the end of it, when Bilbo chooses not to kill Gollum, right? But to spare him, jumps over Gollum, but then he also has a lot of luck not to hit the rocks above him and to fit into that space between Gollum and the ceiling. So here, this whole situation is again the mix, right?
Yeah, and Gollum was also turning around, so he was Bilbo was almost catched by Gollum. It was all at the seconds of time. So here we have also both these powers, let's say it, fate and free will, are working together, but from different direction on both of these heroes. Do we understand it right?
Can you say it again?
Yeah, the question is if both forces, so free will and fate, are working together on both of these heroes, I mean Gollum and Bilbo, in the same situation, but from different directions.
Yes, but you are talking as if in that moment, fate and free will are two external powers that are sort of jockeying back and forth, when Tolkien is trying to write a situation in which none of that is clear, so that the people involved, mainly Bilbo, are not moving within an awareness that they are making choices. Certainly not when Bilbo encounters the ring and puts it in his pocket, which is almost automatic. But I think what Tolkien is doing is trying to create a mess. He's trying to create a situation in which it's not that there are two sides, let alone that they are clear, but that there is a joining of impulses that cannot be separated into this or that, left or right, black or white, fate or free will, and in which the only way to try to apply those notions would be retrospectively, but not in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And what about finding the ring? So picking up from the ground and finding it, it was actually, I don't know, chance 1 in a million. How we can explain this moment?
You can't explain it. But why would you want to explain it?
We have tried, when we have episode about this, we have tried to find who could be involved in the situation. Maybe Ilúvatar by himself, maybe Valas, but still it is a chance. Actually, it is a luck, pure luck that he found this ring.
Yeah, pure luck, pure chance. All of these are terms applied retrospectively. And one thing you really got to remember when talking about The Hobbit is that Tolkien was writing a story for his children that he did not at first consider inserting into his larger legendarium. That came later.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's an adjustment, it isn't between fate and free will. It's within the author about how far to bring one story into another. When you are walking down the street, you are not, I don't think, thinking to yourself, is this an act of free will?
Yeah.
I would doubt.
Yes, of course.
It's only in retrospect that you look back and you say, oh, it's because I walked down that street and met that person. That was surely fate.
Yeah.
But do you see what I mean? You are recreating an event in certain very narrow terms.
So now when I think about this approach, because the next example we prepared was about Isildur's story and the disaster at Gladden Fields when Isildur was killed, the ring got lost, and it looks like fate looking at all of that together. After we know what happened, so this strangely strong and stubborn unit of orcs, then the ring that left Isildur in the water. So it all connects. Looks like fate, but at the moment, Isildur was mortal. I mean, that he was a man, so in theory, this should be only I don't know the consequence
of his choices. Yeah,
which were at the moment probably, but like you are saying, retroactively, it looks like fate. Again.
Well, Tolkien has Gandalf kind of play with that because it isn't not too much later in that scene where Gandalf says to Frodo, you were meant to find the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there, here's another factor, neither fate nor free will, but an intelligence that is reaching down into the visible world and manipulating it. And how far back can you take it? If Frodo was meant to find it, that means that Gollum was meant to find it, that Déagol was meant to find it,
and to die.
Isildur was meant to lose it. And Tolkien gets right up to things like that, and then he backs off because he doesn't want to create a clockwork world where everything moves according to how you wind the mechanism.
Yes, and here again, another situation when we see that is where, and we were again thinking what powers or what are the motivations, the notions, is where Bilbo struggles to leave the ring behind, and Gandalf.
The first chapter of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and Gandalf is convincing him very strongly to leave the ring. So, yeah, was it still his own choice, or was it the choice of Bilbo and Gandalf? What do you think?
Well, the answer is yes.
Again, yes.
If you could break it down into a system, it would lose so much of its magic.
Yes, that's true. And
now there are places where Tolkien comes very close to doing exactly that. Not in the Lord of the Rings, I don't think, but in the Silmarillion, and particularly with Fëanor.
Mm-hmm.
Because Tolkien writes that scene, that dialogue between Fëanor and Yavanna, where she says, you could heal the trees. You've got the light in the Silmarils. Will you give it to me? Will you break your jewels and release the light so I can heal the trees? And he says, not of free will. This thing I will not do of free will. Well, the one thing that we know about elves is that they don't have free will.
Yeah.
Eru is pretty explicit about that. To the Atani, I will give a new gift.
Mm-hmm.
To men, but not to elves. So there is Feanor, who is fated, saying, I will not do this of free will, as if he could. And then the punchline, which is that he can't because they're already gone.
They are stolen already. Yeah.
I think it's rather neat.
Yes, this whole chain of events and how Fëanor believed he could choose, right? And he couldn't really.
Fëanor's story is also it is a very complex hero, I think. So yeah, it is amazing story at all.
Yeah, and going back to Lord of the Rings and this chapter, Professor said a bit what Gandalf said, but we have this iconic sentence spoken by Gandalf, which is also showing, I think, what we are talking today. I will read it. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live in such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
So normally we understand this short line as an example of free will, actually. So all you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you, to us.
Yes.
And do you think there is also fate involved in this quotation?
I don't know. What I'm fairly sure of is that Tolkien was not thinking in those terms when he was writing it. But I don't know. At that moment, he was sort of down in the dirt of events as they are happening, where you don't have the freedom to step back and look at the whole picture and decide. You just have to do what you're going to do in the moment. And don't forget when he was writing,
yeah,
which was in the middle of the greatest war that the world has still seen, World War II.
Yeah, that was really dark and grim times for Tolkien. Yeah.
For everybody. So I think that's the universal truth he had here in this sentence exactly.
Professor, do you think that something from Professor's own life that helped him to build this whole philosophy of fate and free will, of these both forces that are...
No, I can think of something in his life that did exactly the opposite. That was really confusing and really raised more questions than it answered. And that was his experience in World War I,
mm-hmm.
where he lost two of his best friends.
Yeah.
And I've just been rereading the second edition of his collected letters. And one of the earliest ones is a letter that he writes to the remaining living friend about the death of the other two. And it's clear that he is struggling with why they died. Was there any purpose? They were both killed in July, one in July and one in August of 1916, which up to that time was the most destructive battle of World War I. And in the letter, Tolkien, you can see him struggling with, were they meant to die? And if so, who would create that kind of a world? And if they weren't meant to die, then why did they? And that brings up the ancillary question in his mind, was he then meant to live? And how is that fair? He doesn't answer those questions, but you can see him asking them and asking himself how the world really works, whether there is any meaning in the concatenation of events. Do they add up to something greater than themselves? He doesn't answer, but he certainly wrestles with the question.
Yeah.
It's a letter to Christopher Wiseman.
Yes.
In the early part of the book. And it's about the deaths of Rob Gilson, who was killed on the Somme, and G.B. Smith, who was killed behind the line.
Yeah.
Just accidentally hit by a piece of shrapnel. Now, what meaning, if you were a young man, if you were Tolkien, what meaning could you find in that? I don't say that he then said, I will take all these experiences.
Yeah.
Book.
Of course. It's not so
but
easy.
I am certain that these were all parts of his psyche when he was writing.
Yeah, because for sure he thought about it like from every perspective, struggling with the
also from religious perspective, because he was Catholic. So yeah.
We have one more or two more situations from Lord of the Rings we would like to take a look at. And here this is what the professor already mentioned, the situation and the quote by Gandalf. So I will read it again. And this is a dialogue between Frodo and Gandalf. I do really wish to destroy it, cried Frodo, or well, to have it destroyed. I'm not made for perilous quests. I wish I had never seen the ring. Why did it come to me? Why was I chosen? Such questions cannot be answered, said Gandalf. You may be sure that it was not for any merit that others do not possess, not for power or wisdom at any rate. But you have been chosen, and you must therefore use such strength and heart and wits as you have. So here we have that part you mentioned, right? You have been chosen.
Yeah. If we read normally chosen, that for us normal readers, it looks like fate. Yeah, he was chosen. So it was
somebody else,
by some other power, some other force above. So we understand it as a fate that influences Frodo.
Well, what Gandalf says is such questions cannot be answered.
Yeah. But he still confirms that you have been chosen, so you must do.
Well, he takes Frodo's word.
Mm-hmm.
Frodo says, why was I chosen? And Gandalf says, you can't answer questions like that. But if you think you were chosen, then you were, and you're stuck with it. Again, he doesn't answer. He doesn't solve the conundrum of when our actions are directed and when they are freely motivated. We have both words, must and will.
Gandalf didn't confirm that Frodo was chosen by some other force. He is only following up his own words. So that's the key to understand this short dialogue. Am I correct?
Yes, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I didn't think about that in this way before. That Tolkien is. It's like a perfect balance between almost solving that riddle, but not really. Like when it's almost solved, it always he's always
leaves some empty space.
Yes, yeah. For this magic you mentioned.
But he doesn't want to solve it.
Yeah, this is intentional.
He wants to show it.
Mm.
I don't think he intends to solve anything. He wants to show how mixed up it is, how difficult it is in the moment to decide with not enough information on what you should do as opposed to what you want to do. That's why he wrote the books, so you could see how unsolvable such questions are. That's not the point. The point is, you're stuck. Frodo is stuck. Tolkien has him say, I will take the ring. So finally, Frodo makes a choice.
Yes, exactly. Let's maybe, because we have this paragraph prepared, so let's read it as a conclusion. This will be the last paragraph we read today. Then we have a couple of other questions. But yeah, this is this crucial moment that Professor mentioned, when Frodo makes a decision. Gandalf shared all the information about the ring that he had. And Frodo was firstly thinking quietly, and then he spoke out loud. And let's listen to what he said. No, answered Frodo, coming back to himself out of darkness, and finding to his surprise that it was not dark, and that out of the window he could see the sunlit garden. Or perhaps, yes. As far as I understand what you have said, I suppose I must keep the ring and guard it, at least for the present, whatever it may do to me. I will skip a part. Of course, I have sometimes thought of going away, but I imagined that as a kind of holiday, a series of adventures like Bilbo's or better, ending in peace. But this would mean exile, a flight from danger into danger, drawing it after me. And I supposed I must go alone if I'm to do that and save the Shire. But I feel very small and very uprooted and, well, desperate. The enemy is so strong and terrible. And here Frodo suddenly needs to take all the consequences of this, how you call this, messy situation of fate and free will. And it's suddenly at the end of this difficult chapter, because the chapter is like really dark. Now it's all on his shoulders. And he decides to take it.
Well, do you notice how often Frodo says must? I must do this, I must do that.
Yeah, yes, you're right.
Many times, yeah.
Yes, I didn't look at that before, but yes.
Tolkien chooses his words pretty carefully.
Yes, that's true.
I think all words that Tolkien chose were very carefully chosen. But this is a beautiful moment, actually, is when Frodo is waking up from the dark thoughts and dark visions that he had, and now he see the sunlit garden and he made the decision. It also connected with dark and light theme that is also important in Tolkien's Legendarium. Is it that the light that came from the window helped him to make right decision?
Yeah, I think so.
It was the same light that Gandalf just a moment ago
covered the blind and the curtains.
Uncovered actually the window, yeah, because it was covered for a long time, and he uncovered it, and then it helps Frodo to make the decision to take the ring and try to save Shire. Actually,
yeah.
And what do you think about Frodo's love to Shire, how important it was? Because I think sometimes we don't see how important it is to understand Frodo's contribution to the whole mission, mission to try to destroy the ring. How important is that he loved Shire so much?
Well, I think it's central. I was just wondering, this is a little bit off the point, so is it okay if I...
Of course.
Well, while you were talking, I was thinking about the scene where Frodo accepts the burden of the ring, the one at the Council of Elrond. And he says, I will take the ring, though I do not know the way. And Elrond says, it's a heavy burden. I don't lay it on you. But if you choose it, I will say that your choice is right. And there's that old devil. There's Tolkien still messing around with fate and free will. And then Elrond says, I think that this is a task appointed for you, Frodo. Well, that's what Eru says back in the Silmarillion when he says to the Atani, I will appoint a new task. And what I take that whole complex then to mean is not that Elrond is saying you are appointed to take the ring, but you are appointed to make the choice.
That's a small difference, but very important.
Yes.
Like many small things, small words in Tolkien's words.
I would need, because I didn't notice or make this connection in my mind before. We need to check how that is in Polish translation. Is it also that careful with using the words from the books to book?
That's a good point, because it's all based on Tolkien's knowledge of the history of the English language.
Yes, exactly. And it's not, we already know that some things are, of course, not translatable. And keeping
Are you going to look it up? I would love to know what it is in Polish.
We have 3 translations, actually, so it is not so easy to find, but let's see.
The Council of Elrond again. Check. And have you read Lord of the Rings in any other language than English?
No, I have not. I have it in a couple of other languages, but they are beyond me.
I see. Yeah,
I can barely make my way in English. It's so complex a language and with so much depth and so many layers of meaning. That's all I can handle.
Yeah, I see. Especially if because you have such a deep knowledge of the language, which is, for me, because I also read Lord of the Rings in English, but yeah, as a casual reader, I would say.
Can you find it?
Yeah, I'm reading right now. I think that's the one of the, let's say, most popular translation. And we have, the task is appointed to you, my Frodo. If you don't find a way, no one will.
Yeah, and I can read that in Polish now. Jeżeli dobrze zrozumiałem wszystko, co tu usłyszeliśmy, powiedział Elrond, zadanie tobie jest przeznaczone, mój Frodo. Jeśli ty nie znajdziesz drogi, nikt jej nie znajdzie. And here the key is the part, zadanie tobie jest przeznaczone. So it's the task is appointed to you. I think it's actually a good translation. We would have to now check in Silmarillion if this is the same wording as it was there. But that's, that's maybe we can check it later.
Well, that's reassuring.
Yes. But this transition.
That's what we are doing in our podcast. We are trying to find these small differences in words that are used in translations to connection with the original text. It is really hard because sometimes, as Kasia said, some words are not translatable, and it's really hard to find.
I mean, it's hard, but it's interesting, and we also learn a lot. So it's an interesting concept. And you have one more question about the unsolvable situation, I think. Let's maybe move to that.
We have this moment when Frodo, as a mortal, had chosen to keep the ring and try to destroy it. So it was act of free will. And as a result, the predestination of elven ring keepers was to leave Middle-earth at the end of the age. And elves' predestination actually should be written in the music of Ainur. So it is fate. So how much Frodo choice was involved in elven ring keepers to leave Middle Earth. Was that connected or that was actually separate?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I find the connection of the ring, of the one ring and the three rings, to be an enormously complicated matter.
Yeah.
That I've honestly kind of avoided.
For me, when I look it up, it's also unsolvable. And we could ask if they would leave Middle Earth anyway, right?
So it was written that whatever happened, if Sauron wins, or Sauron finds the ring, or ring will be destroyed, the task, the Middle Earth is ended. So they must leave Middle Earth anyway. So I think, I think it was, they were destined to leave Middle Earth at the end of Third Age. I think so. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, you remember that the whole thing started, the Legendarium, not the Hobbit, with the notion of a lost mythology that could belong to England.
Yes.
And the idea that Tolkien was trying to pull down out of the air and kind of get fixed on was, if there had been a time when there were elves, fairies, dwarves, where did they go? And why did they go? Because they're not here any longer. So the notion of an inevitable doom for the elves, let's say, which is certainly part of Galadriel's whole worldview. I will remain Galadriel and go into the West. That is, I will leave Middle Earth, is part of the mythopoetic problem that Tolkien was having to solve with his whole Legendarium. Why do we not have it anymore? If there were fairies, if there were elves, what happened?
They lived.
Left, yeah. All right.
I think
I think
fate and free will.
I think that concludes very well our discussion. We were thinking about solving the fate and free will theme, but I think what we did is looking deeply into that and understanding
more
how
complex way.
How complex this topic is, and how magic also.
Yes. Well, but your questions are all the right ones. And they have led to what I have found to be a really interesting discussion. I've loved every minute of this.
Yes, we
but
as well.
It's not the end.
It's not the end, because we have slightly different topic as a third part, let's say, of our discussion. Because this is something you mentioned. You are rereading the letters, so it's actually on point, because you have written in A Man of Antithesis, one of your essays published in Splintered Light, that Tolkien's letters can be dangerous for an inattentive reader, because there is a lot of content in which the author contradicts himself, even in the letters to his own family. And exactly. Revised and expanded edition where letters were published last year. We even have it here. And could you please tell us how we should read the letters correctly? What should be the approach to reading them and understanding?
Ooh. An open mind. That's all. Look at the words and see what they say. Letters are funny because we only have one half of a conversation. We don't have whatever Tolkien was responding to. And we are stuck with the fact that they have been chosen by Christopher and Humphrey Carpenter, which means that they have been put into a particular venue and context. The first letter in the volume to Edith, written in 1914, is the first letter of how many that they say he wrote to Edith.
Yeah.
But there's only this one, and it's not there because it's to Edith. It's there because it mentions Kalevala. So we have to look at who made the choices, what was in their minds when they made the choices, what was left out, what were in those hundreds of other letters to Edith that we don't get to read. The letters were chosen in the light of a prospective reader's knowledge of the Lord of the Rings. And you have to remember that.
And can we use them actually, quotations from the letters as a point of view of Tolkien? If we choose only one quotations, for example, and we say Tolkien said it, that's not correct way. I think we must always look at other point of view, because sometimes he show it to us that he has other point of view. Yeah. So.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You raise a very good point, and you always have to remember that. For me, one of the most important letters from that perspective is the letter to Peter Hastings. I don't remember which number it is. I think it's 151 or so. Mm-hmm. To the proprietor of the Newman bookstore, who wrote and said, "How dare you write about reincarnation? That's no part of Christianity." Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I remember, yeah.
I didn't, I need to admit.
Well, what's important about that letter and the inclusion of that letter is that Tolkien never sent it.
Okay, I see.
So it's, draft.
Is it because it was too honest? Or why?
Yeah.
He apparently sort of unloaded his mind in a very long letter. It's many pages long. And then he didn't send it because, well, who knows?
That's a good question.
And was there ever, because I don't know, was there ever an attempt to publish two-sides conversation? So the letter from the Tolkien and what he answered to?
I think it's impossible to find some.
I mean, I know that for sure there is no pair to every letter, but
and you must have permission to do it.
I know.
That's the second. So
okay.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yes, actually, the next, it's connected to the question about the letters, because I don't know if you know, Professor, but now we have a great privilege in Poland that History of Middle-earth is translated to Polish book by book. And now we have first 5 volumes published, and next 7 are on the way. You can also imagine of how big translation challenge that is to capture all those small details. History of Middle-earth can be also dangerous for inattentive readers, because it's a collection of text rejected for some reason by J.R. or Christopher. There is only a small number of texts which were meant to be in the main story, but they didn't fit on the pages, like Afralbreth, Finrod, and Andreth. And you had a discussion about it, right?
Last year, I had a long discussion with one of our listeners, and we argued about some specific theme. And he used some lines from Nature of Middle-earth. That is, for many, called the 13th volume of History of Middle-earth. And I said that he cannot use all notes from Tolkien, from History of Middle-earth, as his final opinion, because History of Middle-earth was for first published by Christopher to show us the process of creating Middle-earth. And also you must be very careful and cautious to read History of Middle-earth correctly. And Professor, what is your opinion about this? How should we read History of Middle-earth? And do all Tolkien fans must read or know History of Middle-earth?
Must is a strong word.
Must is a strong word, but should...
I would agree. I think that's a necessary background to understanding. Were you guys able to attend the British Tolkien Society conference about a month or so ago on Christopher's centennial?
No, the last we attended was the Christopher Tolkien, the Christopher
100th birthday anniversary.
Well, I can just say it was very, very interesting because what was addressed were all the problems that you're talking about.
Okay. We
need to look for
skip it. Yeah, sometimes it's not possible to see everything. Yeah.
No, it isn't. But I think he did the best he could. I think he did an amazing job. I don't know of anyone else who could have done it. And yet we know that what we have in Christopher's History of Middle-earth is his choices. Talk about free will.
Yeah.
of what to present and what not to present.
Yeah, but still we must be really cautious when you read History of Middle-earth, because it is dangerous to find something and catch something that is only part of Tolkien's worlds, and secondly, it is something that was rejected. Actually, it was at some point rejected, and that's the, I think, dangerous part of reading History of Middle-earth.
I agree.
For me, it's also dangerous from this perspective that you can easily lose some magic or some faith in the whole story to see how, I mean, of course, it's like, it's not only with Tolkien, I guess it's with every author or writer that creates complex words, that they are versions, there are corrections, and this is how editing process works. But if you see all the moving pieces
and details, yeah.
Well, I guess you have to decide what point of view you find most acceptable, and what scholars you find most congenial. There's so many schools of Tolkien criticism now, that the most you can do, I mean, they're all carefully thought out approaches, and you just have to decide which is the one that's most congenial to you. I will go with Tom Shippey every time. He is the earliest, but he is also the best to me. Mm-hmm. His basis is linguistics, so he's trusting to the words, and I find that a very firm platform on which to build an argument.
Yeah,
I think The Road to Middle-earth is the best book written about Tolkien.
Yeah, Tom Shippey is. I agree, totally agree. Tom Shippey is one of the best, or even the best, as your professor said.
He is the best.
The best. Okay.
I'm sorry, you said one of the best, and that's your opinion. Mine is, he is the best.
Okay.
Okay.
I agree. I totally agree. So yeah, I don't have any arguments against. So even if Tom Shippey had written only 2 books, so it's not much, but they are really, really complex, and he sees things that not many can find in Tolkien Legendarium.
Yeah. He's written only 2 books, and it's not much. But it is everything that is necessary.
Yeah, it is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
The last question we wanted to ask is actually about your own books, Professor. And we wanted to ask you, do you know about any, or do you plan to have any translation of your stories? Because we would be personally interested in Arthurian voices. Arthurian legends aren't very popular in Poland, but Maciej especially likes them very much. So we have them on our wish list. But if they are translated to Polish, for example, then it would be easier for many our listeners to get to know them.
So do you know about any planned translations?
I don't know of any plans for translations at all. It's kind of a surprise to me that they're still available in English. I do have 2 publishers. One is Gabbro Head, which did the Arthurian voices and the fiction that I wrote, The Spiderweb Alley.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also Signum Press, which is run by Corey Olson, and they are publishing a collection of my short stories. Actually, it's the 2nd edition. The 1st edition came out 2 years ago. It was a very, very slender volume of short stories called A Waiter Made of Glass.
We need to check it out.
You can find it on Amazon.
Yeah.
All right. And you had very last question, right? When we talk about books.
Yeah. The question is, did you read any books from Polish authors? Fantasy books, I mean, because we are fans of fantasy. And do you know any, let's say, legendariums from Polish authors? For example, The Witcher.
No, could you recommend some? I would love to know more. That's an area in which I am completely ignorant, and I would welcome your suggestions.
So
I think which are translated to English.
The Witcher, for sure.
The Witcher, yes.
So The Witcher from Andrzej Sapkowski is, let's say, the classic of Polish fantasy, I would say. So we recommend to check it out. And the others we would have to check if there are English translation. But The Witcher is...
Witcher is translated for sure. So that's the only thing.
Would you send me the information about that and where I can get it? Thank you.
And do you, in your research work on the university and in general, do you read a lot, like for fun, other novels, other fantasies, or you don't?
I don't read very many other fantasies because I always find them disappointing.
Yes, that's.
I read about biographies. I read about other writers, and I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read a lot of fantasy, but that's true. Nothing is that complete.
Comparable.
Yeah, nothing is. I didn't find anything that complete and comparable to Tolkien. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, Professor.
My favorite authors, aside from Tolkien, would be Roald Dahl, Noel Coward, Ernest Hemingway. People of that generation. And they were all spies. It was interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know. I knew that all of them are connected with Second World War at some case, but I didn't know that they were spies.
Is that a question?
No.
A statement.
I'm confirming. Okay, Professor, we are slowly running out of time, but I think we had an amazing discussion.
I think we are, yes. We've been talking for an hour and a half.
Yes. And that's amazing.
Yeah, that went really fast.
It has been a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to us to have you on our show, and that was great. That was really great.
Yeah, thank you very much for the visit to our Green Dragon Inn. And once again, it was a real pleasure to talk to you. And maybe we will find more time and possibilities in the future to discuss other themes as we go through the Legendarium together.
For Lord of the Rings at the beginning, because it takes some time to finish these books.
Okay, well, thank you both for a very enjoyable afternoon.
So now it's time for our outro and farewell.
So this is the end of today's episode. Thank you very much for your time in the Green Dragon Inn, and remember, we are waiting for your comments and questions. And don't forget to click subscribe and like buttons on our channels.
Notes and other material used in this episode can be found in the description of the episode on our website. There you can also find our Tolkien collection, a full, very rich library of books and other media we use to create the podcast.
And in the next episode, we are coming back to the third chapter of Lord of the Rings, Three is a Company. See you in the Dragon Inn next week. And as Gandalf said, may the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks.